In June 2024, I had an opportunity to attend an Arangetram, a Manch Pravesh by Mishra Sharma. And it was a Karnatak dance Manch Pravesh. And the very special thing about this Manch Pravesh was that all the musicians and Mishra herself, these are children who were born and brought up here in the US.
When we started composing for this Manch Pravesh, when I started working on various pieces that I was putting together, I didn't think of myself as an American Indian classical vocalist. I thought of myself as how would Bade Guruji, my Bade Guruji, Sangeet Marthan Pandit Jasraji, how would he react to the way I was composing and thinking? Would he approve of these compositions? Would he approve of how we are performing? And so that's really where we've come as a community in the United States, where we're performing at the highest standard because that is what is expected of us. That's the expectation that we put on ourselves for this Manch Pravesh. It doesn't matter that you're American. You don't get any kind of special treatment because you're American. You have to perform at that global, professional, exceptional standard.
The first occasion of the music was Ali Akbar Khan's visit to New York City in 1955, when he played a concert and recorded the first LP. Then in 1965, he was invited to come to teach during the summers, and he taught in the summers of 65, 66, 67, and then in 1968, he started his own school in Berkeley, California, called the Ali Akbar College of Music. Now, it attracted a lot of the young people who, at that time, were interested in Indian philosophies. And Kansap taught without any written materials. He taught the music vocally, and he taught it on his instrument. And they imitated his playing and his singing, and they were delighted with it. And it wasn't long before the Ali Akbar College of Music took shape and became established.
Indian music in the US has come a long way. The story of Indian classical music began in 1950, early 1950s. One of the most celebrated violin virtuoso, Yehudi Menuhin, world-famous violinist, Yehudi Menuhin, traveled to India. He was in his late 30s, and there he discovered two classical musicians, who would become world-famous in their own right after, say, 10, 20 years later. And these two musicians were Pandit Ravi Shankar and Ustad Ali Akbar Khan. So he was so taken by their music that in 1955, he invited both of them to come to US to perform. At that time, Pandit Ravi Shankar, he was in his early 30s, and so he declined. But Ustad Ali Akbar Khan, he reluctantly agreed, and he came to perform in the US, in New York. And his concert was arranged in the Museum of Modern Art in New York in 1955. And that was the beginning of Indian classical music in the US.
Da, da, din, din, da, da, din, din, da.
My name is Michael Dwan Singh, otherwise known as Bunty in the Desi community. I was really happy to be a part of Arshia's Manch Pravesh as a sarangi player. I'm first generation sarangi player, one of the few sarangi players in the US. I started learning about 13 years ago. I used to play tabla and then always wanted to play the sarangi and found a teacher in India online through Skype. And I've been studying with him for about 13 years, as I said. It's a very versatile instrument. It's also a very rare instrument, and I've been able to bring it into a number of different spaces across the country and play with all kinds of musicians from all kinds of backgrounds, which has really enriched me as an artist. And so it's that language, that unique sort of American experience that I've brought to my playing, and that has enriched me and that I bring to the table with any gig I do, for whether it be a Hindustani gig, a semi-classical gig, folk gig, or even just playing with other musicians from other backgrounds. So one of the things I'm actually very grateful for in being able to do this Manch Pravesh with Arshia and her family has been how inclusive they've been. I think as first generation South Asian Americans, I think a lot of us grew up sort of knowing that we'd often get second preference to people from India or Pakistan or the South Asian areas we've come from. And it's slowly changing. And I think being able to be an artist who's sort of in the middle of that is really exciting, because now people are putting their faith in us as bearers of a tradition that is far older than all of us. And sort of that's really the wonderful thing about programs like Arshia's, is that they've been able to say, hey, we trust you all. You're going to bring an element of our history as well as an element of your own background to the stage and make this sort of the magical presentation that it is.
So I would say that was a milestone Manch Pravesh, and such a thing I had never seen before.
How this journey started, how this concept started, that everybody will be the first generation Indian Americans.
Going into this process, it made me feel comfortable knowing that artists and musicians and performers can be even more talented or just as talented than musicians that we're learning in India. I think there's a lot of stigma around not learning from a guru in India, but I think we're furthering the knowledge to the next generation and allowing new coming artists and younger students to see that we are progressing so much as Karnatak dancers and musicians and Hindustani singers. So I thought, it's such a great idea, and I think it's great for the further generations.
Performing and reciting Paranjuri Amad. Paranjuri Amad is typically performed at the beginning of a Karnatak repertoire. Paran means a solid bowl, and when combined with an Amad, it is a Paranjuri Amad. Dhin, dha, dha, dhin, dhin, dha, na, din, din, da, ti, te, ka, ta, ti, te, ka, ta, ga, di, kene, dha, dha, ka, thung, ha. Dha, ghe, dhin, ghe, dha. Dha, dhin, dha. A, te, ta. Ki, re, dha. Ta, ka. Thung, ga. Ta, ti, ki, te, ka. A, ti, te, ka, ta. Ti, te, ka, ta, ga, di, kene, dha, ta, ka, tum, dha. Dha, ge, dhin, ghe, dha. Dha, dhin, dha. Tetta, kira, da, takka, tunga, tati, gita, da. Tata, kata, kati, kena, da, te, tata, te, a, te, tata, te, 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 tata, te, 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 tata, te, 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 tata, tata, dita, adi, dita, dha. Tata, dita, adi, dita, tada. Tata, dita, adi, dita, dha, dha, dha. Tata, dita, adi, dita, dha. Tata, dita, adi, dita, tada. Tata, dita, adi, dita, dha, dha, dha. Tata, dita, adi, dita, dha. Tata, dita, adi, dita, tada. Tata, dita, adi, dita, dha, 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 dha. Da, da, ding, ding, da, da, din, din, da, te, te, din, din, da, da, da,
din, din, da, da, din, din, da, da, din.
I'm here with Pranav Gatraju. He was the percussionist, the tabla player for Arsha's Rangmanch Pravesh. And what an amazing performance, Pranav. So, for dancers, it is so important that our percussionist is really good. And I can't think of a better person that Arsha could have started this journey with. And you want to tell me a little bit about this journey with her, with the whole process?
It's been such a journey to see where she started from, to where she is now. It got to the point where we didn't even have to speak about cues. We just look at each other, we right away come on the same page. And I'm so proud of her because doing something like this is not easy. What you saw today is not just months of us preparing, but years and years of practice. Years of practice with Guruji, with Momita ji, years of constant refinement. And to get to this point, to present a 2.5-hour solo, non-stop, with some of the biggest musicians in our area in the attendance, it's not a joke. So to end, I'm so proud of Arshia for stepping up to the moment.
So when it comes to Arsha Sharma's Manch Pravesh, what it was a very historic moment for all of us in the sense that it's the first time that a fully Indian American-backed artist and performer had the opportunity to present on this one stage. What that means is that not only that we're able to put together a show, but we're able to piece together a wonderful performance for an audience to view, such that they don't have to feel that, these people are Indian American. They're just musicians at the end of the day.
I was really honored to be a part of such a historical event. The musicians were such a great group of people.
And whose idea was to have all the first generation, the artists here?
I definitely think it was mostly my dad's idea.
When we started to work on the Rang Pravesh idea, that was almost a year ago, initial thought was that we will have to get artists from India because that's what people doing Arangetram and other performers do. And while we have no experience in doing an event of this type, and even for Arshia's Guru Momitaji, this was the first event, so that was the natural choice. However, I was always inclined that there's so much talent in the New England area that it will be good if we can do something locally. So the first person actually Momitaji connected was Aditya Shah, the lead vocal singer. And when I talked to him and I heard his story of how he learned under Pandit Jasraj and all the great things, this whole idea started coming that if there's Aditya, there has to be a lot of other artists who are local and who can really form a unique combination. A lot of the credit goes to Momitaji and Aditya to really bring all these artists together, that they have worked with it. But I remember having some early conversations where we said, well, it'll be nice if we have everybody who's local. And it just worked out that we found everybody who was, first generation artists from the New England.
I am very proud that we made history in North America through our Manch Pravesh.
This is Aditya with me. He is the main lead singer for this event. Your part was huge. You composed so many pieces to this and you've put a lot of work into this. So talk to me a little bit about it.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure working on this concert with Swati Sharma also, who's also female lead vocalist with us. I was really excited at the opportunity to present rags that have possibly never been sung before in North America. And on top of that, to have an original piece or two that I composed based on the inspiration from my Bade Guruji, Sangeet Marthan, Pandit Jasraj. So to bring that legacy of the Mewati Gharana to this stage here is a truly wonderful feeling. And I'm a proud American Indian classical vocalist. And there used to be a time when Americans trained in Indian classical music were regarded as a rare species or second-class citizens in the world of Indian classical music. Now, my Bade Guruji, Sangeet Marthan, Pandit Jasraj, when he blessed me and him and his senior disciples trained me They trained me with the same level of rigor, if not more, than any disciple that they have in India. They treated us equal, and they had the same expectations because they wanted us to perform at the biggest festivals in India. And as my Bade Guruji put it to me, he said, until you start talking and people hear your American accent, up until that point, they're going to have no idea that you're American, because there's no way to tell, because that's how you've been trained. And so it is a proud moment. This Manch Pravesh, as well as the Indian classical community in the United States, can be proud that they are standing on their own 2 feet and representing a fully enriched tradition of Indian classical music in the United States. And we may even see in the future new Karnatak lineages being created in the United States. I mean, who knows? And so this is a proud moment where the Indian classical community in the United States has matured and can hold its own in the global Indian classical music diaspora.
1950s, Yehudi Menuhin introduced Pandit Ravi Shankar to American audience, to Western audience. He came in contact with jazz musicians such as Bud Shank, Paul Horn, John Coltrane, the very famous jazz musician, and he collaborated with Philip Glass, the composer. When he came in contact with George Harrison, one of the Beatles, the whole scenario changed. And that's his association with George Harrison saw a big rise in Pandit Ravi Shankar's music. So in 60s, he began making albums in the US. And then in 1967, Pandit Ravi Shankar and Ustad Alarakam performed at Monterey Pop Festival. And in 69, he performed at Woodstock Festival before 500,000 people.
Biggest coming out party for tabla was in the 1960s at the Monterey Pop Festival in California, where Pandit Ravi Shankar ji and my father Ustad Alaraka played for thousands of people, and some of the greatest living artists of that time were sitting in the audience, like Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin and the Grateful Dead's Jerry Garcia and amazing artists who were very popular at that time. That's why it was called Monterey Pop Festival. And in walks Pandit Ravi Shankar ji and my father Ustad Alaraka and sit down cross-legged on a riser and start playing a concert. And next thing you know, they were being applauded and loved and revered all over the place. One of the highlights of that performance was a 10-minute tabla solo recital of my dad, where Ravi Shankar ji put his sitar down and just kept time with his hand while my father played. And so in the 60s, with both Ravi ji and my father interacting with great musicians of this world, whether it was Yehudi Menuhin or George Harrison and Bud Shank and so many others, Yusuf Lateef and whatnot, they were already forging ahead, creating awareness of and love of in the audiences of it, not only Indian music, but of the instruments like sitar and tabla. So the platform was already set by people like my father, and in India, people like Pandit Kishan Maharaj and Pandit Samta Prasad ji of the Banaras Gharana, who were so famous and their performances were so looked forward to by the audiences that tabla for the audiences became just as important an instrument as a sitar or a sarod or a shenai. And so that being said, the platform was set for someone like me to bounce off and go forward. The hard work was done there by these great maestros, including Ustad Thirakwa Khan Sahab and so on. And I happen to be one of the first beneficiary of the hard work laid down by them.
So through 1970s, Indian classical music was getting popular. There was a lot of interest from the US local population. However, there was no facility, no opportunity to learn that music. So in 1980s, as immigrants from South Asia started to come and settle in US, some of the musicians who came here, they were not professional musicians, but they were into music. So they started opening schools, started teaching Indian classical music all over the US. So 80s and 90s saw that kind of growth. That means the talim, the education, the training of Indian classical music. So it is well known that Pandit Ravi Shankar, of course, exposed Indian classical music to Western masses, of course, in India as well. And through him, Indian classical music came to be known as Indian music all over the world. And people say that Pandit Ravi Shankar exposed Indian classical music to the masses in the US and internationally, whereas Ustad Ali Akbar Khan taught Indian classical music to the masses. In his lifetime, people estimate that he must have taught about 10,000 students through his colleges. So he has a college in California, Ali Akbar College of Music. He also established a college in Switzerland, which is, even now it is run by one of his students, Ken Zuckerman.
Today, it is largely a process that certain schools have taken. Like the University of Pennsylvania has Alan Miner, who's a major scholar and a sitar player in Indian music, and she teaches. The University of Texas had a student of Ravi Shankar in Austin, Texas. There was another major class at the University of Illinois. So it would be at the universities that the music was taken over. In the very beginning, it was 1991, I taught classes in world music. But during those sessions, there was a period in which we focused on Indian music, say for 2 weeks in the class. And after that, I found that there was enough interest in starting a class in Indian music. So in 1996 at MIT, we started a class called The Music of India. Well, it was literally the music of North India, but also we did some South Indian music as well. And we studied, I taught vocal music to the students, and they, of course, had to listen to a lot of vocal music and instrumental music recordings as part of the training in the Indian music, and they had to take exams and at the end of the class, or sometimes during the middle of the session of the class, and identify whether it was a khyal or a drupad or a sitar or a sarod or what kind of music, the music it was. But it was classical music, and it was as it was taught by Ali Akbar Khan to me.
Now, if you look back at the Indian music since 1955 and today, that how many Indian concerts are being held, how many Indian musicians are coming from India to US, and in how many other schools have we started teaching Indian music and Indian dance. How do you look at the evolution of Indian music in the US?
Lots of different kinds of North Indian and South Indian music, and both instrumental and vocal. In North Indian, that's khyal and drupad music, and the instrumental traditions that are derived from those styles. And These styles have prevailed in the United States and created audiences that are that back up these artists. And so the artists are especially attracted to the cities of New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. And they have other places like Austin, Texas, and other places around universities that sponsor concerts that they have followed through with. And it's become a international music as a result.
So starting in 1950s, in mid-1950s, this was the growth of Hindustani music, that is North Indian music in the US. But Carnatic music also, which is the another style of Indian classical music, the South Indian music, also grew tremendously in the US. It came a little later, but I would say now Carnatic music probably is much more active than Hindustani music. There are more concerts, more artists are visiting, and there's a Carnatic music festival which has been running for last more than 30 years in Cleveland, Tyagaraja Festival. It's about 10-day-long festival which takes place in Cleveland every year. Carnatic music came to US a little later, in early 60s, when an American musicologist, Dr. Robert Brown, invited two Carnatic musicians, Dr. S. Ramanathan and Mr. T. Ranganathan, to Wesleyan University in Connecticut. And thereafter, there was a group of Carnatic musicians. They were young at that time, in 1962. They were a group of 4 musicians. They called themselves Sangeet Madras. And they consisted of S. Balchandar, the veena player, and Ramani, the famous flute player, Vellore Rambhadran, the ghatam player, and Umayalpuram Shivaraman, the famous mridangam player. So they came to the US in 1962, performed in New York and DC, and thereafter in 1966, M.S. Subbulakshmi performed at the UN Assembly, and later on in 1967 as well, in Carnegie Hall in New York. So, Carnatic music, a few years later, but now both styles of Indian classical music, Hindustani and Carnatic, are quite popular, performed, and there are many jugalbandis. After these visits of Carnatic musicians in 60s, the Wesleyan University established a department where Indian music was taught, and they invited Carnatic musicians especially. In Wesleyan University, Connecticut, T. Vishwanathan, a flute player, was instrumental in bringing up the department and teaching and arranging events of Carnatic music. So much so that under his guidance, there was a Western musician who grew up in Andover, Massachusetts, by the name of John Higgins. He is a well-known name in Carnatic music. His singing was so authentic that you could not make out whether it was a native musician from India or a Western musicians singing. So he was one of very few musicians of Carnatic music who achieved a very high level of proficiency in Carnatic music. Then there were some other musicians as well. David Reck, who practiced Veena. He was a child prodigy in Western music, but he traveled to Chennai, lived there for several years, and practiced and imbibed Carnatic music. So Carnatic music also saw a tremendous growth in the US from 1960s to the present day. There are multiple schools in a single city. I mean, in Boston itself, I've seen the growth of number of students of Indian classical music as well as dance. There must be more than 1,000 students, I mean, including dance and Indian classical music. There's a tremendous interest. Also, there are concert organizers. The number of concert organizers have also grown. In our city in Boston, there used to be only one organization called Kalavati, run by Dr. Sharat Chitri and Rekha Chitri, who used to bring Hindustani artists. On the Carnatic side, New England Hindu Temple, they used to organize Carnatic music concerts. And later on, there are other organizations came up, such as Mithas, Lundquist, and they organized both Hindustani and Carnatic music concerts. It is so heartening to see that musicians here, young musicians can develop here in US. So much so that they don't not only perform here in the US, but some of them also go to India and perform in festivals there.
In the quiet city of Nashua, New Hampshire recently, history unfolded through music. For the first time ever, a full Western symphony orchestra performed classic Bollywood songs. This unprecedented event, led by Symphony New Hampshire and Indian-American singer Anuradha Palakurti Juju, was not just a concept, it was a cultural milestone. For the musicians of Symphony New Hampshire, it was their first step into the colorful, emotional world of Bollywood. For Anuradha, it was a debut of a different kind, her first time performing with a full symphony. What emerged was a seamless fusion of traditions, powered by months of collaboration and artistic risk. The concert, aptly named Symphony Masala, audiences of all ages and backgrounds swayed to the songs like Lag Ja Gale, Chaiya Chaiya, and Pehla Nasha, melodies reimagined through orchestral arrangements crafted by composers across continents over 9 timeless months. No electronic sounds, just pure acoustics. The result, a soundscape both familiar and refreshingly new.
चल छैया 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 चल छैया 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 चल छैया 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 चल छैया 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 चल छैया 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 चल छैया 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 सारे इश्क की छाँव चल छैया छैया सारे इश्क की छाँव चल छैया पाँव जनत चले चल छैया छैया पाँव जनत चले चल छैया चल छैया 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 वो यार है जो खुशबू की
But Anuradha's journey does not stop here. She is no stranger to accolades. Her album, John Mary, produced by Boston-based Juju Productions, earned India's prestigious Radio Mirchi Music Award, an unprecedented win for an American artist. Through Juju Productions, she built a bridge between Indian tradition and global music stages, performing with Bollywood greats and Grammy-winning musicians alike. Symphony Masala was not just about reinterpreting songs. It was about redefining borders between cultures, instruments, and expectations. In that concert hall, something extraordinary happened. East and West did not just meet, they resonated, and the echoes of that harmony are just beginning to travel.
When we talk about Manch Praveshas in the United States, what are they? You put the person who's doing the Manch Pravesh in a position of pressure. The spotlight is on them. They have to do a good job. Especially if the video is being taken and being broadcast in front of the world. People sitting in India are going to judge you if you don't do a good job. And you know what? That's a good thing. Because when you put pressure on artists to perform at a global standard, what you get is artists that perform at a global standard. I'll tell you, when it comes to people learning Indian classical music in the United States, I'll tell you about my experience. For me, excellence and sticking to our tradition was not an option. Growing up in the Deep South in Florida, Indian music was my connection to my identity. If I didn't have Indian music, I don't know who I would be, really. And so I had that drive in my belly to be myself and to do an exceptional job at Indian classical music at the highest standard. And I also knew that if I was not performing at the highest standard, my own gurus would not tolerate it. They didn't care where I was born. So I think that's why the Indian American community is becoming exceptional, because the expectations that are being put by the gurus who are teaching them are extremely high. And in fact, I would even say, as someone who is an Indian classical musician, but is also trained in Western classical music, both vocal and instrumental, I took a responsibility on myself to represent Indian classical music to the other Western classical musicians where I was growing up and in college. And I had to do an exceptional job so that when they listen to my performance, they think to themselves, Indian classical music is incredible. So I have to perform as well as I can so that they leave the auditorium feeling like they've just experienced magic. And so I think that's the difference. When you're in a community where they don't know what this music is, there's no crutch to rely on. You have to do an exceptional job because you are representing your entire community to that crowd.
What was helpful is that I never had to change anything about my dance to help them. They were able to kind of mold their performance and what they had to do to me. And because we had practiced so much, it was really easy in case I had missed a beat just to move on to the next cycle. And we all really helped each other out. And it was really special throughout the whole time that we were performing. I have so much appreciation for my mom for giving me all the talent, support, and love to be able to turn something that was just a hobby for me into a real passion and something I want to continue doing in my future. Kathak has changed my life in so many ways, and I'm so happy that I am able to help my mom's dream come true, and she has definitely helped my dream come true to be able to perform in such a large audience and be able to share both of our talents in front of so many people and share more stories of Radha, Krishna, etc. So I really love my mom, and I thank her so much for teaching me about bhav, expression, and much more. So she is my superstar.
So basically what I would do, I would just open a story and show the pictures and illustrations from, Krishna's ISKCON pictures, so that and tell this backstory, so that if you don't have the backstory, the feeling of what you're portraying would not happen. So she understood that part. Once she understood that part, we would sit down, and I think we became better devotees of Krishna's.
Yeah.
So I think the love for Kathak brought us together, and accomplishing a goal brought us together, because it was, I feel we both felt 100 out of 100 ourselves beside the audience brought us together.
And it was a pretty unique experience. I related to the work that I do, that how you bring teams together to really accomplish a common goal. Most of these artists had never worked with a dancer before. They have performed solo, they have performed as a group, but to work with a dancer live is a different skill set, and they all had to adapt and accommodate a lot of different things. So bringing everybody together was a great learning, that how they all had to change their style to match with somebody else's footwork. So that was very unique. What was unique, of course, that they were all first generation US born artists working for the first time on our Manch Pravesh. And then everybody was working full time. Arshia was going to boarding school. All the artists had full-time jobs to really accommodate and find time during the weekends to get everybody together. Was a very unique and challenging experience, and we are grateful to all of them that really put in so much time, effort, and commitment in making this event what it turned out to be. In our case, for Kathak, there is not much precedence. For some other dances, there is a lot of Arangetrams that happens every year, and so many of them. So there is a process there. There's a recipe there. There is a plan there that people can follow. For Kathak, this was unique that most artists were doing it for the first time, so it needed extra effort. But it's all doable. I think people should enjoy the process, but it needs a lot of commitment, effort, and more importantly, passion to really.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 100.